Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our regular Tuesday meeting. This is October 1. It's amazing how quickly September went. But anyhow, here we are today. Would you please, if you're able to, stand up and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It turns out that Rick Dahl, the chairman of the board, will be back tomorrow, but he's not here today. So the two of us are your host. Speaking of the two of us, shall we hear about the minutes?
Yes, I've had a chance to review the minutes and they seem to be in order. I move their adoption.
We have a motion on the floor to approve the minutes, the activities last week. Any comments? Call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. I vote aye also. And the consent agenda, please.
Yes, on our consent agenda today, we have an interlocal agreement proposed for us to sign with the city of Longview for the 2024 Burn Justice Assistance Grant. That's a federal program to assist in funding school resource officers. The county's portion is relatively small, just a little over $10,000. And we agree with the agreement is giving up our share, that $10,000 to the city of Longview. They're the ones that actually hire officers to work in the schools. And so the proposal is to agree with that. We've been doing that as long as I've been on the commission and probably many years before that. The second item we have is a resolution certifying that the Consolidated Diking Improvement District number 2 has prepared and adopted their budget for 2024 or 2025. We certify that they've turned it in, which is what the law requires. We're not approving it. It's not our responsibility to approve the spending. We just record that it has been submitted. Under correspondence, we have a letter from the Cowlitz PUD. Basically, the same concept that they have turned in their budget for 2025. If you've paid attention to any of the news media, that budget does include a 5% rate increase, the first in quite a few years for the PUD. The next several items are copies of letters between the owners of the dams on the Lewis River and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Every year, the federal government has requirements for inspections and then work programs to resolve any kind of questions that come up under the inspections. And they outline some of the changes throughout all of the letters. The Federal Regulatory Commission is satisfied that the proposed solutions are fitting and appropriate, and they've not discovered any problems that are going to be a threat to the safety of the folks living downstream from the dams. In fact, one of the programs is to try to utilize an emergency response system in addition to the sirens that they have, utilizing some reverse calling technology to also notify people that in case something does happen. And then we have vouchers that were reviewed and approved by the auditor's office in amounts totaling a little over $5.2 million.
Thank you. In sort of reverse order, the emergency notification includes this service that, don't remember how much we pay, but it's $50,000 or something like that, where they can target this cell phones in the area, and it's reverse something or other, but Department of Emergency Management through the Sheriff's Department typically handles that. And I'm actually curious, can you flesh out a little more the first one, there, the interlocal agreement? I mean, $10,000, how does that get determined and by whom?
There is a formula that is determined by the federal Department of Justice is the one that administers the burn grant.
Not the state, but the Fed.
The federal government, yes. So this is money that comes from the federal government. Excuse me, it comes from the taxpayers of the federal government and
Yeah.
their heirs.
Yes. And so if we were to go to, is this the entirety? Does Longview consume it all in this case, or do
So
we?
there's more money that Longview gets because of the population.
Okay.
But again, the amount has steadily gone down since the program was started. When I was on the city council, we approved the same grant, larger amounts of money. But even for the city of Longview, that amount has steadily gone down. It used to pay for 2 full-time officers that would divide up the schools. And
It doesn't do that
obviously
now.
it doesn't even pay for a full FTE, but it's better than nothing. The school resource officers have proven time and time again to be a very good resource for kids to see police in a non-adversarial position, to develop a connection, a relationship. And then they are eyes and ears for the police for inappropriate behaviors that are going on. So it's a good relationship all the way around for a relatively small cost.
Do the other municipalities receive any of this kind of money?
I don't think so, because we don't sign similar agreements. So. But I'm not sure. I'm not
Okay.
sure.
Let me see if there are any questions about the consent agenda. This is the time to come forward on that.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the consent agenda as submitted by staff.
We have a motion on the table to approve the consent agenda. Hearing no further comments, I call for the vote. All those in favor, please
Aye.
say aye. I also vote aye. Motion does pass. Now we go to the motion items.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good
Sean
morning.
Early, Public Works. Today before you, we have a bid award and contract execution to Lakeside Industries for the asphalt replacement at Riverside Park. That'll do the tennis and basketball courts for a total amount of $72,321.98.
Questions?
Sean, the source of the money for these improvements comes from where?
These are going to be from ARPA funds.
From ARPA funds.
Correct.
Okay, so no matching other than not an RCO?
Nope.
Oh, wow, okay. I know we have some other projects out there that got some RCO money. RCO is a Recreation Conservation Office, and the governor, years ago, the state passed bond issues that made money available for all kinds of wildlife and conservation projects. And we've had quite a few of those grant dollars coming to us and used at the shooting range in particular, but other parks have also received grants. In fact, in an earlier agency, Commissioner Dahl was a member of the state committee that oversaw park grants, interagency committee. That was replaced by the RCO office.
This is in your area because the parks and our parks board or our parks people report in through you, right?
Correct. The Parks Department reports to Public Works.
And Riverside Park is pretty active. Can you, how many basketball courts? Are these full basketball courts, half courts?
So there are 4 hoops available. I believe it's 1 full-size court with 2 additional hoops on the side, so it can be split off into smaller. And then there's 2 full-size tennis courts as well that are encased by
How many
fencing.
of the tennis courts?
2 tennis courts.
I can't remember, at one time, were the tennis courts painted for pickleball?
I don't know that answer. I'm sorry.
Didn't know if that was still going to be the case.
So we plan on repainting these after the overlay has been done on it.
I beg your pardon?
We plan on repainting these. I believe it's going to be in-house.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I move that we award the bid to Lakeside Industries for the asphalt replacement of the tennis and basketball courts at Riverside Park in the amount of $72,321.98, and further direct staff to execute that bid award.
We have a motion on the floor. This is last opportunity for questions or commentary.
I guess I'm wondering when was the last time it was blacktopped? When did they do this last time? How long does asphalt last as opposed to something like this? It seems like concrete would be a one-time thing that would last a lot longer than having to redo asphalt. I'm just curious.
I don't know the exact date. It has been some significant amount of time. The surface has come into disrepair, a lot of holes and slumps and things of that nature.
You know, if it was 10 years ago, 5 years ago, roughly 100 years ago, somewhere in there.
I would be taking a guess.
While there have been repairs, I think it may be the original. It's not in very good shape.
It's not at all.
The basketballs, when they're played, the dribbling, the ball goes crazy, as well as, tennis, it's even worse. Just because it's cracked and weathered, as happens with asphalt over time. Last time I saw it, it was obviously in need of repair, but it isn't as bad as gatoring. It's not that, hasn't deteriorated like streets will when they are little
Correct.
tiny chunks.
Right.
But we don't want people to trip and fall and get injured. It's a liability, so.
We don't know what's a better value for the dollar, whether to put in concrete one time or continue to do the asphalt if we don't know the life expectancy.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. It's a reasonable question. I typically think it would require an expert to answer that. And I lost my asphalt membership card, so.
Okay.
Well, to be honest, to pour the asphalt would require, to pour concrete would require the asphalt to be completely taken out
Right.
and the forms. Considerably more expense than $72,000.
That'd be a one-time expense versus the asphalt.
Well, the asphalt lasted 40 years,
Yeah.
40 years, you think?
40, yeah,
Okay.
it's been there for a long time.
I go through the port of Kalama frequently enough, and they've got great basketball court and great the tennis courts, actually, I meant, and half-court basketball. And you'll see people using it, but it's fairly infrequent. Those are made out of concrete, I think. But the reason some of that comes to mind is around here, an outdoor sport is hard to deal with 6 months out of the year or so. And I'd be interested in seeing kind of an open air with the cover on it, like you go to the port and you'll see a lot of their picnic areas or gathering areas have the cover on it, like at Tam O'Shanter and the assembly area. So maybe that should be on the list.
I can just barely understand you over that fan in the back of the room.
Oh, I see. Yeah, it's like, well, you're so fortunate. Thank you for telling me. My apologies. I was just commenting that it would be interesting to consider a future improvement there by putting some kind of a cover over it. It's open air and all that, but that would help the asphalt last considerably longer, I would think.
Yeah, I would imagine. All right, thank you.
Thank you. See no other questions. I'll call for the vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I also vote aye. Motion does pass. And we are now going to go into
I think we have a
miscellaneous.
We have a miscellaneous, right? So, Mr. Chairman, as you know, yesterday was the deadline for people making appeals to the Board of Equalization. So we have to have a Board of Equalization that has at least 3 members. And we've been struggling to get the 3rd member so we can go forward with this Board of Equalization. For those who don't know, the Board of Equalization can adjust people's property assessments that they've received the notice in the mail from the county assessor and her staff. If they disagree with it, there's a process to go through, and this board can make the final judgment for an assessment. So the appeals are scheduled to begin, and we need to get the 3rd person. And we have finally an application from a woman by the name of Dana Gutenberger. She lives on Laurel Road in Longview. Many years as a property manager, works for a local electrical contractor, and she's actually personally been through the process, so she's familiar with how that goes, and she's actually willing to serve. So, Mr. Chairman, I would move that we do approve Dana Gutenberger to join the Board of Equalization.
I am quite happy to have that experienced individual apply, and very thankful for that. So we have a motion on the floor. Any time for comments? If no comments, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I also vote aye. Motion does pass.
Thank you.
So public comments? Anybody about any topic? We'll ask you to keep your comments to under an hour. Individually, that is. I don't see any hands. I've got to be careful here. I think Rick would be upset if we managed to close this out in a record time.
Well, you know, if we aren't having very long meetings, we could probably reduce the salary of the commissioners. What do we care? Oh, we've got 3 of them out there that do care.
Actually, there's a question we could talk about, and as soon as the audience is empty, we'll stop talking. There is, every time there's a new set of commissioners coming on board, there's a group of people who wants to convert this into a charter county. And I haven't found an argument in favor of the charter county that I thought was a solid argument until last night. I was thinking and I thought, the electeds now under a charter county could actually be appointed by the board, right?
It depends on what's in the charter. Yeah, the
Right.
charter
So-
could design it that way.
And we've talked to folks here in the situation that while the board controls the budgets of the elected departments, we have a rather narrow or limited amount of control over the electeds. That is different under a charter because all of a sudden, the board has control.
That if the charter makes those otherwise elected officers appointed, yes, that makes a fundamental shift in the monies that are managed. There are 2 groups of officers that we cannot change the election of.
Yeah.
The judges, they're an independent branch, so we only have the budgeting say so over the court system. And then the other one that we have to have hands off is the prosecuting attorney. We can't touch them, but all the other officers can be appointed,
Including the sheriff?
including the sheriff, yes.
Yeah,
It's been interesting. There have been a number of counties that have done that, as you've described. And if I remember correctly, all of the formerly appointed sheriffs, the people have changed the charter back to have elected sheriffs. They want that kind of independence in the law enforcement branch. One county actually has an elected director of building and planning. And that's Clallam County. And as I haven't asked recently, but it is a position that no one has won re-election to in the 20 years that they've had it as an elected office. So kind of interesting.
yeah,
how it goes.
sir.
Mr. Mortensen, when it comes to the county charter, and the commissioners have a complete authority almost about the elected officials based on their budgeting. They could cut their budgeting, they could add to their budgeting depending on how the relationship is with the commissioners. So there is the money does dictate a lot of authority. Actually, when it really comes down to it, it's the ultimate authority is cutting funding, gets rid of programs or adds to the program. So the department heads have learned not to go against the commissioners because of there will be consequences to their budget next year. So there is some accountability there.
It may seem that way, but that is not how it turns out. There have been many instances where an elected department, that's what we're talking about, elected. The ones that report to the board, that's a different story. The ones, the electeds, we can do things until they decide that what we're doing is so unpleasant for them that they sue the county. And that has happened, for example, with law enforcement, where the board in one county decided they wanted to have a little more hands-on on what was going on in the sheriff's department. The board got sued and lost. And one of our most monstrous expenses is law and justice. And we were just reminded that the Superior Court stands alone in the charter, that we can't touch that. And in a similar vein, they mandate some behavior of some sort. And if we say, we don't approve of that, we're going to cut the budget, guess what happens? So you are correct in suggesting that there is a gentleman's standoff in the sense of you be nice, I'll be nice kind of thing. And that's really how it ought to be. But the reasonability is often in question.
Go ahead.
You're probably very much aware that the three of us commissioners do tend to be targeted by other elected officials in campaign. The complaints are loud and clear, and, city officials, use us as a punching bag, and so do other elected officials. And by talking about it, I don't want to suggest that it's a huge, major problem in local government here in Cowlitz County. I think for the most part, we do talk with each other and we have conversations, but, in election times, it's not unusual for us to get blamed for all kinds of stuff. So there is that natural tension. We do have control of the budget, but they all run for office too, and they will campaign against us, if we cut their budget. And who's going to challenge the judges if we're not funding them appropriately? They're probably going to be pretty persuasive.
Yeah.
We've actually had Mr. Mortensen and I have actually had the luxury of serving during an extraordinary time when we've not actually had a long recession. When I joined in 2013, we were just coming out of the Great Recession from the late teens or the late aughts. And, but we've never had to contemplate serious layoffs. Our budgets have expanded, and we make sure that we always have a balanced budget. We have a fairly substantial ending fund balance, which is kind of our reserve, our savings account. So I know I heard stories from 2008. The cuts were very deep and very, very difficult. And the recession was awful. And if I remember correctly, I think about 10% of the workforce was eliminated. And that was across the board, and everybody worked together. There was an awful lot of common cause. I mean, we had declining revenues, and so we all worked together. At least they did, but that we really haven't had that problem. It's
We've been blessed, and the landfill is a blessing.
yes, well, and
Yeah.
that has also been a
The way I analyze problems is from sort of a science background. I take a look at the boundary conditions. And that's where I get to try to put myself in the argument of the opposite side. So the other opposite side of some issue wants this. I say, okay, how would I implement that if I were they? And that leads me to thinking about the nuances, and that's a very constructive approach to explore everything. Then presumably, if we're all honest at the table and we are able to, we can then say, oh, okay, I see this solution, I see that solution. Each of those solutions has its own shortfalls. So we just can then decide that amicably what's on the table and say, okay, we'll take this and just hope that we can handle the unintended consequences. This might seem strange, but in the private world, that's not an uncommon approach. In research and development with high technology, you've got hardware, software, and within the hardware, you got divisions between RF and the digital world, and the software can span analytics all the way down to PLC. Anyhow, the arguments are a business makes its livelihood by producing a product. And that product is actually a mix of all these things. How do you organize it? Do you organize things along a product line, or do you organize yourself around technology lines? So this is a software group. If I'm a program manager of a project, I'm going to talk to the fellow that leads the software group and say, I need 15 engineers. And the supervision of those engineers happens to be in the technology department. Or I could do the opposite, and the project has its own staff. You'll see them often reorganizing, which means they go from this structure to this structure, and then in about 5 to 10 years, the comings, the problems that arise from that choice are large enough that they move back to this one, the very same thing they came from. And that way they kind of try and minimize the long-term effect. Anyhow, I thought that was interesting. And so when I take a look at the county charter, I'm taking a look at that and I'm saying what's good and what is bad about that.
Well, one of the other things that when you have a county charter, you go from 3 commissioners to 5, with I think is very important, considering that one of the, there was a statement by a governor said that the most powerful position in the state is a county commissioner, because all you need is to have one other person to agree with you to get things done, which is a dangerous political ideology, especially if you're politically aligned like that, to almost it really makes it difficult to have a non-biased approach to judicial and legislative things that come up. And then the other thing is, when I think of the money that the commissioners make being learning on the job, it's a very, when you go to 5 commissioners and, to bring their salaries down to $40,000 a piece, do a part-time thing and have nonpartisan and 5 positions really helps open up the avenue to have a lot more people apply for the job. One of the most difficult parts is being a county commissioner is if you are a CEO or a large business owner, you can't do this job because you can't take the pay cut. So doing it as a part-time position and get a county manager would help alleviate that and have a lot more people apply for the job. I really have a hard time with the fact that the commissioners start going on are getting $110,000 to learn on the job training. There's not too many jobs out there in the real world that you get paid that much money to learn what you're supposed to do and get the experience underneath you. It's just unbelievable. There's not, like I said, there's not too many jobs you have that kind of opportunity.
Yeah, you said a mouthful. There's actually considerable lack of understanding of what a commissioner does and should do and all that kind of stuff. A big misunderstanding is a commissioner is paid by the hour. He better be in his chair 8 hours a day or he's not earning his keep. And of course, that's really not the case. Learning on the job is one of those things that occurs with almost anything. So the situation, whether you're a mayor and then you become a county commissioner, it's not just a shoe-in. It's no longer quite as automatic as you seem to believe. And the pay is something that can be done, can be justified on the decisions made. Bad decisions we make here have many bad repercussions. In the short term, it's easy to identify. In the long term, not so easy, but until it's hindsight. So what you're doing is paying like for CEOs. Okay, all that being said, it is something that I thought of pretty substantially when I first came into office and thought, well, I'm retired. I don't need the money. And then it occurred to me, again, analyzing the boundary conditions, that's hard. I cannot make decisions that determine the spot to fit my qualifications or my circumstances. I do not want to condemn the Board of County Commissioners to be old retired people. It's got to be people that actually earned a job through the campaign, hopefully with good campaigning and honest campaigning and honest understanding. I've got a lot of experience in small and big organizations. At one time, the group that reported to me 25 years ago had a float of about 15 million in terms of the salaries. And I forget where I was going with that. The point being is management has a lot of understanding of mechanics, yes, but understanding of people, yes. One of the things we've joined on and done pretty nicely is I think we have good departments now. They're led by rather good people. It wasn't always that way. So I could go on. It's just,
Yeah, I'm just saying it's not as,
oh, I remember now. Yeah.
and I just, there is definitely advantages of having 5 board members versus 3 in terms of commissioners. And like I said, it's a lot less power for one position or 2 to have versus 5. So that's one of the, and
Yeah,
you could also,
let me address that. We have a state here where the governor is one person, and he's done some hellaciously bad things in a tyrannical way there. There was a time when we had only 2 commissioners here, and we did our best not to take advantage of the fact that either of us had the veto on that. And you cannot compensate for decency by adding more people to the table. There is a notion that I would have to digress on that, but decisions get harder the more people you add, and design by committee is not such a good thing. I've seen that time and time again with all kinds of the advisory boards and groups. People think we appoint them to the advisory board because they have an axe to grind. No, it's not that. We want them to apply their expertise, even if it is damaging to their own acts. We expect them to contribute the basic knowledge and information. Another argument that is really, we can philosophize all day long as we want. Now let's just step back and see what counties are operating more successfully, however you define that. And I look at the data. Are charter counties more effective than statute counties? I have never seen anything that suggests that. I think about Clark County, and I've met some of the folks there. It is nothing I would write home about as this is a model I got to follow.
Well, Mike, you might recall that I served on the last Board of Freeholders that offered a charter up. And that was in the late 90s. And we had a 21-member Board of Freeholders. And we had an agreement that with a group as large as that, we wouldn't approve anything on a simple majority, but we insisted on a 2/3 approval for anything to be adopted and turned into a part of the charter. And we came up with a document that had quite a few changes, a significant amount of voting on all taxes. That was automatic. None of this, just the three of us make the decision. Expanded the size of the county commission, provided for an executive member of staff, modeled a little bit after the business model, where you've got an executive that carries out the policies that the board of directors makes. And I was in favor of that. We have over 100,000 people, 115 will hit that in a few years. And I think 3 commissioners is not enough representation of the people, but the voters disagreed and they voted overwhelmingly not to change, to keep it the way it was. So, and that's been a generation ago. So the magic solution to effective local government is a direct reflection of the effectiveness of the leaders you elect. And there certainly has been turnover on this board. So the suggestion is there's not a whole lot of satisfaction with the job we're doing, because it seems like District 3 is the one that's had the turnover. I don't know why, but that's been the interesting case. When the salaries were low, when I first got on board, the salaries were right around $81,000 a year, which was about what I was earning as a school teacher with 35 years experience. We were getting 2 types of commissioners, pretty young guys, you know, Meisner and Gardner and Swanson and Rasmussen, all from that district, interestingly. And everybody else was either retired or they had to give up their business, because this is not a part-time job. There are just too many boards and commissions we represent the county on. That, you know, I don't know how you'd operate a business except on a part-time basis. So it is a lot more extensive to get on board. Most of the times the county has adopted a charter, it's because of a perception of corruption going on in the county government. And that was certainly the case in Clark County, when county commissioners appointed a political ally to run the building and planning department down there. That triggered just a revolt. And in King County, they had a problem of very corrupt officials being in office forever. And finally, the people had enough and they shifted. It doesn't mean that things are not controversial. I mean, that's where most of the people live. Pierce County adopted a charter. They had a problem with the sheriff's department and corruption. Whatcom County adopted a charter, and Clallam County. Those are kind of the exceptions to the rule, because the other ones are all large counties. So there's been plenty of experience of trying different models. But the key thing is make sure the best people are elected to office. And if they're not, throw them out.
Yeah, there are a couple of other things. You mentioned the pay, and that was one thing that several years ago, I took that each of us can volunteer to take a cut in pay, and I took a 5% cut in pay at the time because I thought things were going to be a little bit hard on us, and the economy, I was wondering and so forth. So I thought, you lead forward. I didn't advertise it, but I actually undid that not that long ago, because this is the only job where I've had people who thoughtlessly and viciously insult, accuse, do things that would certainly be absolutely qualified as a hostile work environment and unreasonable. And in fact, this is the strangest job where you got to pay to get the job. This is really unusual. And
I hope you weren't referring to any current members of the board in terms of
oh,
screaming and yelling.
no, we actually, let me talk about that for a moment. People out there think, well, you're Commissioner District 1, so you don't give a damn about 2 and 3. Answer is no, we have never, in all the time I've been here, and you've been an additional 4 years, I've never heard any commissioner say, well, that's so-and-so's problem, not mine, it's his district. We don't work that way. We also don't do, like
Well,
I
this
just,
year, actually,
oh, we're teasing.
we've
him,
actually been picking on Rick because we're leaving and.
But we tease him,
we
yeah.
tease him.
And then there is this comment, back in the old days, if you were in disagreement with someone, but you couldn't win your argument, what's the thing you did? Well, you're a racist. Well, the new one is if you can't agree, you're a partisan. We got to get the partisanship out of there. We're all nominally Republicans. That is about as well defined as, I can't think of anything, but anyhow, we don't look at each other and say, well, now what would a Republican do in this case? We don't look at things like that. We've never done that. Saying Republican simply means that when we ran for election, we had support and we believe in some of the principles really amounts to the constitutionality of things. So when you find somebody standing up and saying, I want to get rid of the partisanship, they don't know what they're talking about. It's just an easy handle to assume a pejorative interpretation of someone's action because you don't agree with it.
So interestingly, the state of Nebraska abolished partisan offices. They have one chamber in their legislature, unicameral, and they all run quote nonpartisan. But everybody understands the Republicans control the legislature in Nebraska. Even, you know, it's just, you find
Yeah.
out based on personal recognition. So,
All right,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you.
thanks. Good
Thank
morning.
you for your patience.
First off, I want to say thank you to both of you. We're going to lose you and you both are gems. I want to tell you that you both have brought to the county, you both have brought a lot of information, a lot of knowledge on things to our meetings. You have both been very, very good about listening to the public input. And actually, I think you've made some changes in your decisions based on some of the input that was given to you during the time. And we appreciate that. I feel sorry that you were aggressively addressed today. I believe that a city manager is not what we need. All three of you have your departments and we've heard them. They've come to our meetings. They've given their proposals and needs. You've addressed their needs after discussing here so that the public can hear, and you've made your decisions on that. And we appreciate the fact that we are part of that. We know that you are trying to find the best answers for the departments that come and ask for money. And I sincerely doubt that there's any leverage of favoritism when you give out money. It's not that. I believe that a city manager would have too much power. Now, the three of you divide up your departments, from what I've been told. And I think that's wise because not one person has all the power of a city manager would have, or a county manager. I don't think that's a wise thing to have one person have that much power. I believe the three of you, I know it's a heavy load but you're doing it beautifully. And they do come and they do ask for things. And we have been putting our input in, like I mentioned. And we're just thankful. We're thankful for that. You guys are doing a great job. And we're gonna sorry to see you guys leave, both of you. It's gonna be sad.
Are you sure that's all you have to say? Couldn't you say more? Thank you very much. Well, I think we've
I guess two things. One is I'd like to see, like the PUD commissioners, you guys all have 6-year terms and they're staggered so that you don't ever, this board should never come into a situation where they're losing brain trust or the experience like they are this year. So I would be in favor of changing that to 6-year terms. I view a larger board as opportunities for individuals to get together in small groups that don't make a quorum and be able to manipulate behind the scenes and potentially be a lot bigger problems. The other thing is, I think, and I haven't been there yet, so I may change my mind on this, but I think that a single general manager puts one more layer of bureaucracy between citizens and you and the board to be able to make it easy to point your finger and say, well, he's running the business and that was his decision, end of discussion. So at this point, I'm not too in favor of the idea of a single manager at the county level. But I certainly do recognize that you guys, the two of you leaving at the same time, is one hell of a loss for the county in the brain trust department. And I know that's going to put a lot of responsibility on Rick's shoulders to help train 2 new commissioners. It'll be fun and adventurous, I'm sure. Out of curiosity, I always also, the other thing is I view the commissioner's job as a 24-hour-a-day job. If in the middle of the night you have a road washout or something, I'm sure your phone's going to ring off the hook. If the county road's got to be repaired and now all of a sudden you got to get county crews out or do something in the middle of the night, do you ever get those calls or are you completely exempt from being involved in that?
Well, I think the phone call that comes to us is from our staff explaining what's happened and what they're doing to address the emergencies. I mean, quite often.
Do you get out of bed
But
and
we
go to
get,
the
we get
site?
calls all the time though at home and, and people have concerns about all kinds of things. So you're
Yeah.
right about the 24/7.
Yeah, I think what you say is, the assumption is we are answering the phone 24/7. And there are plenty of times where we've had to go someplace on a Sunday. And I'll give you an example. Tomorrow, I may not be here depending on whether we get a full, at least 2 commissioners to proceed. And I have a funeral and memoriam to attend tomorrow, but I subordinate that to this obligation. Just like on a Sunday when I got a call, we are having a meeting of some folks at my house. We want you to show up. Yes, sir, show up. And your personal plans tend to be set aside. That's just, I think, what the job requires.
It's about just pretty much what I anticipate.
Yeah.
Thank you for all the time you spent trying to maintain a upright ship sailing on a decent course for the county. Appreciate your time and effort.
Thanks. Thank you.
Morning, Commissioners. I would like to echo Flo and Steve's comments about your dedication and the sacrifice and service that you've made to our county over the last couple of years. I also would like to call out a couple of fallacies and misnomers that have been mentioned today. One in particular, one of the things I've learned in my life is that we view the world through our own lens of experience and who we are. And that was pretty evident today. You two are the only men in this room who know what it takes and what it's like to be a commissioner. No one else. Mr. Reuter has never been a commissioner, Mr. Farrell has never been a commissioner, and I have never been a commissioner. So there is going to be on-the-job training for all three of us, if any of us are in that seat at any given time. None of us know what it takes to do what you men have done and are currently doing. So there's going to be on-the-job training for whoever is sitting in those two seats next year. The other thing is to assume that the county can run with people working part-time and making decisions on a part-time basis to someone who is full-time. The county has full-time problems and we need full-time solutions. We need people who are willing to sacrifice and do what they need to do to help the county solve the problems. And we need solution-based ideas and people stepping forth up to do that. With regards to the pay, we need people who, Mr. Mortensen, Mr. Commissioner, whoever, you both said that this was actually a sacrifice in pay for you when you took this position. Those are the kind of people that we need. This doesn't need to be a step up for somebody in their economic position to run this county, to take this job. Some of the people, I personally speak for myself, we're sacrificing income, we're sacrificing lifestyle and quality of life to step up and do what we see needs to be done to help this county. So I'm not focused on the pay. I'm not focused on the power as far as a charter goes and a county administrator goes. I don't want another layer of bureaucracy. I want the people who the citizens of Cowlitz County elected to be accountable to the electorate. That's the way it should be, and that's the way that it needs to be. That's how the balance of power stays in force. The people who we elected are accountable to the voters, and that's the way that should stay. You take the game of football, and you can leave all the rules in place. You don't change one rule in the game of football. The only thing you do is you change the outcome of how you win. Instead of saying the person with the most points wins, the person who has the most ball handling time, ball control, you win the game. Doesn't matter how many points you have. If you control the ball more often, you win the game. You change the complete strategy and outcome of what that game is. Okay, the way things are set up right now, you two men have been accountable to the electorate the entire times that you have served. And that's the way that it should be. And that's, if I win, that's the way that I intend to keep it. We are accountable to the voters. I don't want to put somebody between me and them that I can point the finger at them and say, oh, that was their fault, not mine. That's not how our system of government is set up. That's not how it should work. And once again, we view the world through our own lens of experience and who we are. We need to be accountable to the voters, as you men have been during your terms. Thank you.
Wow, I hope you don't mind if I steal that football analogy, because that is spot on. One little change, and that's what I feel about people in general. Attitude is more important than almost anything else you can come up with. There was something my colleague mentioned in terms of you got to elect the right people, and he's not suggesting he knows who the right people are. He's suggesting that you should know who the right people are. And someone speaking mentioned brain trust. And that reminded me of how much I enjoy English because of the versatility of the language, that the versatility. Anyhow, when you elect someone, make sure you spell brain correctly. It's BRAIN. It's not BRAYING. It's brain power, not brain power.
Braying.
How'd you like that one?
Braying, yes, that's true. The one thing a couple of comments, the whole issue of job training. doesn't end. We're continuing to learn things just because we work in an environment where the rules change all the time because they're made in Olympia. And we are always having to figure out what did Olympia do to us this session? I mean, it's huge. And there is a constitutional concept that folks everybody deserves their representation in court, in the justice system. And if you can't afford one, the one will be provided. So that leads us to the whole concept of indigent defense. And for many, many years, this county contracted with lawyers to provide indigent defense. And as our poverty rate steadily climbed, so that we're now at about 34% of the people qualifying for various government's programs because of low incomes, the number of indigent defense has skyrocketed. Well, we eventually addressed that, not this commission, but before I came on, by creating a department and actually hiring staff lawyers so that we have in public defenders. And of course, the prosecutors have their staff lawyers. Then about 2 years after I took office, I think it was 2015, the state Supreme Court, elected by the people, responsible to the people, announced that there are to be caseload limits on public defense, which translates into you got to hire more lawyers to provide that. And of course, who has to pay for that? Well, we don't have the luxury of the federal government to pawn it off on the future generations. It's got to come out of current revenues. And just last year, they have suggested that the caseloads aren't small enough yet. So we actually have made a choice to move to a larger location, and in January, I think it's January, that office is going to be made. That change is going to be made because we have to provide a larger area for indigent defense. Not a rule that we made. We were pretty satisfied with the program that we have, but people who don't live here make the rules on us. That's a constant battle and constant thing. Somebody said earlier that the governor described county commissioners as the most powerful elected officials. Anybody who's lived very long in Cowlitz County knows the most powerful entity in the state of Washington is the Department of Ecology. They have singularly continued to oppose economic development for Cowlitz County. And the official that runs that department is appointed and directly responsible to the governor. And I hope the governor in January will have a pro-growth attitude for Cowlitz County.
Interesting.
They have a lot more control over than anything we can.
Yeah, good points and interesting follow-up regarding lawyers. It's always when we typically teach, I think, that monopolies are not a good thing. Stifling competition is not a good thing. Now, if you choose to become a lawyer, you have to work through the lawyer system. So when we have the Supreme Court requiring you to be a lawyer by certified by certain institutions and certified by a certain examination process, they decide whether we need more lawyers or not. What could go wrong? And I have sat in lots of trials and looked at things, and there's some things that just happen that it's like, that's wrong. How would you deal with that? Well, I tried in one case to talk to someone about a bad decision, And it was clearly a bad decision. And you had to go before a judge to talk about another judge. What do you think your chances of success are there? And then if you manage to go through that hoop, you go to the next level of judges. And then you go to eventually the Supreme Court. My point, of course, is everybody's a member of the same club. It's pretty tough to win that then
So
battle.
to provide a measure of balance, however, there are times when the lawyers are very helpful to us. And the best example of that was the lawyer who we hired to help us decide how to deal with the landfill. We had our top two managers of our landfill decided to retire at the same time. And we were open to the idea of perhaps looking at privatizing the management of the landfill. And we said, but we need the best legal advice we can get. And we hired the number one lawyer in the state. And one of his first questions, he says, when he came in and was reviewing the setup, he says, where are you making money? You should be making money hand over fist. Landfills are money makers. And he said, well, it's all the money is staying in with the utility. And he said, anyway, he gave us the prescription on how to get the profits from the landfill to be spent for the best interests of the county. And you may have noticed, those of you that have attended our meetings, we spend a lot of money on maintenance now, HVAC systems and roofing and paving lots and those kinds of things, important things that needed to be done. It's because we have money coming to us from the landfill, because a lawyer told us how to structure the budgets to allow that to happen. And I think that has solved an awful lot of challenges that we have faced in the last several years. And we've kept the rates almost the lowest in the entire state of Washington, which I think is a pretty awesome thing. I think there's only one county that has lower rates than us.
Yeah, just to avoid confusion, my comments are about the system, not any particular lawyer. And in fact, the lawyers that the new commissioners will have for their support here, I have very high esteem for them. It doesn't mean we always agree on what we need to do. Their job is to tell us, if you choose path A, this is the consequence. If you choose path B, this is the consequence. And to make sure that we understand what the law requires. It is then up to us to decide what course of action to take. So they have no pretense of trying to tell us how to do things or what things we should do, unlike ecology, who says you must do what we want you to do. They just say, this is what happens if you do it or don't do it. And I think that's pretty valuable. At this point, it might be interesting to, no, I won't go there, but there's something about the judicial system that would be interesting, but I'm afraid I'm going to take some lumps already as it is.
I think so.
I was going to say, you were falling down on the job, not having heard from you yet.
Well, just one comment. I'd like you to be able to solve that fan problem, is that I can barely hear
Oh.
the discussion, so it's hard to be engaged with whatever this noise is back here.
Oh, that's my fault. The clerk asked whether it should be turned off, and I thought again, we all have problems. I could hear fine. I've got my high-powered hearing aids in, and so I assumed the world was fine. My bad. I apologize.
Well, that's a recognition. Those of us that have been around a few years, worked in the industry and worked out in the world with noise, don't have our young hearing anymore.
Sorry about that.
Is it too late to turn it off now? Probably. Is it obvious how to turn it off? Oh.
You'll turn
Those
it up.
on-off buttons are things of the past. Now it's all electronic sequences. Of course, I'm being a little bit sarcastic, if not a lot.
So you are turning it off in order to adjourn the meeting.
You must hear the adjournment, right? Oh, my God.
We have to, Flo, we've got to start all over again now.
Say, go back to the top.
That is amazing.
Well,
So now are you going to say something? Are you going to pick a topic? This is an example of when Flo mentioned, I try not to use people's names, sorry. When one of the previous speakers said, we listen to them. Perfect example, right?
So just to follow up to the discussion last week about arsenic is that I see today's Longview Daily has an article and there's some of our constituents in the county talking about their arsenic. And I had spoken that I remember when the arsenic level was 50 parts per billion was kind of the health range, and it's went down in many places. Apparently it's 10 parts per billion here now in some places. But the article says theirs recorded almost 600 parts per billion. So that's a whole magnitude of difference when you start talking. My point was, what do the levels really mean? It gets back to health and saying is that people have different chemistries in their body, but at the same time, what is a reasonable level? Because the treatment for arsenic is not a good solution. I mean, health-wise, but also for taking arsenic out of water. So.
Yeah, I think you bring up an interesting issue because part of, I think, what government can do best, it has the labs, it has the resources, it should be able to do things like do forecasting for hurricanes, or it should be able to say arsenic of this quantity and so forth, do a digest of scientific findings and put that in language that is nice and easy and clear and clearly organized. We tend to say, no, we want mandates. You will check your well, mandate that you check your well and all of that kind of stuff. And I think that's been the essence of a lot of discussion is mandates.
So the story of how we've dealt with arsenic in water is kind of interesting because it's a great example of what some people have described as mission creep. We had some homeowners have their wells tested and they felt that the arsenic was too high and came to us for help. What can you do for us? And our county engineers put together a very preliminary program on what we could do to bring an entirely different source of water. So they would go off the wells and tap into the water system that already serves the folks in the neighborhood. And we're talking about the Toutle water system, which gets water from the Castle Rock water system, so municipal water supply system. But the folks who had the arsenic in their well water live up a hill. So then you had to engineer something that is engineered for pressure mains because they have to go up. And that increased the cost. And then they said, well, if we're pushing it up, we may as well take advantage of that pipeline and have a much bigger reservoir to serve the whole area because water pressure is rough. And so all of a sudden, what was relatively uncostly, inexpensive, well, it wasn't even, never was really inexpensive. I think it was 1.2,
Yeah,
has mushroomed to about 2.5 or 3 million. We did get a congressional appropriation for a portion of that money because members of Congress want to demonstrate that they listen to people. Okay. And so that part of that funding was taken care of. But every time we turn around, that project keeps getting more and more expensive. And it is, it's one of those frustrations you have to deal with. We are trying to help those people out, and it's just more expensive than we ever dreamed it would be.
and parallel or a very similar issue is fluoride in the water or fluorine. And municipalities want to fluoridate the water supply, and there are people against it. And the argument is being reduced to is fluoride or fluoridation. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? And to me, that isn't the pertinent argument. The pertinent argument is if you believe that fluoridation is a good thing, you have the freedom to buy your own product to provide fluoride for your purposes. But if you have it in the water supply and you don't believe in it, what can you do? It's a bit onerous to have to purify your own water. So it seems like you can avoid a lot of problems by just not mandating things or not doing things, because statistically, you think more people would like it than more people would not like it.
I mean, it is an interesting thing on an issue like that. You change the public policy by changing the members of, say, the city council.
Yeah.
And,
By the way,
but the question is, did they tell the people ahead of time that they were in favor of fluoridation or against fluoridation? That never came up during the campaign. So there's a little, people vote for people based on evidence they present in a campaign about their competence. But if there's something like that, that never comes up in a campaign.
well, that's
That doesn't build trust. That kind of undercuts trust, but it is.
But that's a problem. I don't think people should be elected for promising to do a specific action, instead promising to look at things under some principle of some kind, because the principles typically don't change. The Bible hasn't changed much lately, and the Constitution hasn't changed lately. But whether fluoride comes in or not, who knows? Who can predict all of those, right? And so all you want out of your elected official is to review things intelligently, honestly, and to have an open ear. If you're going to pay for the tab, I want you to approve the tab.
Correct. So therefore, that would lead to the question, what is the level of arsenic in our public supplied water? You know what the recent tests would say?
I know in the city of Longview, we get the list every year, once a year in the bill.
Yeah.
And it lists it, and they tell you, here's what the standard is, and they're always below that standard.
I don't know what the number is.
Yeah,
but there's a deep question there too. There's somebody probably in the Highlands who has a job, and they have to pay taxes. Is it moral for us to use the tax to help a few people who have a 5-acre home up somewhere where there's arsenic in the water?
Right, and that gets back to the use of the water, is that as some are saying, is that if you know that you have a higher level, you do have the choice of bottled water or other forms. And just like we have many places for your drinking water, and of course, your bathing water and other water doesn't really
Doesn't really matter. Yeah.
doesn't matter, is right. It's the same way with treating water at our home residences, putting in filters. Well, do you filter all the water that goes out and does the yard and everything else, or do you just worried about filtering a small amount, like you're saying, for fluoride or others, the stuff that is ingested? So anyway, choices. So that's what we look for. It is the ability to make reasonable choices, both you representing us in general, but then that we can make our general choices and saying, well, because I have a well that generates more arsenic than what the limit is, it's got to be, you are mandated to do something. Well, that's not what we really want. We want choices that say what are our options.
By the way, that particular arsenic issue led to a Washington Post reporter to interview the two of us, and there's an article out from the Washington Post on that, and I think it was a fairly well done article.
It had to have been. They talked to you and me.
But we're like two peas in a pod.
Oh, okay.
You forgotten already so
I did,
soon?
I did.
Yeah. All right, I think we've exhausted everybody's patience. The clerk of the board is saying yes. I think we're adjourned. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.